Everybody, welcome back to Stories We Read. I am super excited about my guest on tonight or on today. I'm always recording at random times, so you guys never know exactly when this is happening. But I'm super excited about my special guest today, which is Jessica Pryde, who is the editor. I got my book there. Who is the editor of Black Love Matters? Real talk on romance, dating, and happily ever after. And so I will be honest, Jessica, when I first off, your book was showing up everywhere, all over my Bookstagram and all over social media. And I was like, who is this? First off, Black Love Matters, absolutely. Like, who is she? Where is she coming from? And then I was introduced to you directly from one of the guests that was on my show. Her name is Tua Dover. I'm not sure if you know her, if you're familiar with her, but she's a Black librarian as well. And she was like,
Hmm.
I think you should reach out to this a fellow librarian, a fellow colleague. Her name is Jessica. She writes the book, or she's the editor of the book Black Love Matters. And I was like, yo, this has been popping up everywhere. I have to reach out to Jessica. So I was super excited that you were very open to having this conversation. So thank you for coming on.
And thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to um, fellow folks of all of the things.
Right, right, because we do all the things. Even though we do have one common thing in common, which is our profession as librarians. I do all the things too. I write as well, and I also have my own book. So yeah, I'm just super excited about this. Like I said, I'm going to start us off. Before I start us off with some icebreakers, if you want to give more information about your background and who you are as a person to the audience, please feel free to do that.
Sure. Um, like Bree said, I am Jessica Pryde. I currently live in Tucson, Arizona, although I grew up in Washington, D.C. And I have been a librarian of various sorts um, throughout my career for the past 13 years, which is wild.
Yeah, I've only been a professional librarian now. It'll be 6 years in May. So I'm like, wait, where did 6 years go that fast?
Mhm.
So I can understand when you're calculating the numbers in your head. You're like, wait a minute, what?
Yep.
When did 13 years pass that fast? So that's fun that you've been here for that long. And I'm an advocate for the library. I'm an advocate for more people of color coming into the field of librarianship because
Hmm.
although we're very diverse in our audiences in the public facing space, we still need more people of color who operate and come into the profession. I was actually, before we got on this Zoom call, I was convincing someone in their DMs on why they should become a librarian. I was like, it's not too late. If you decide that you want to come on over. We need more of us here. So I was like,
Hmm.
yes, I'm glad. That's a door. I'm going to talk to you about that later. So I'm going to figure out how to convince her to go to school for librarianship. It's like, listen, we can fit this into your schedule. You can go online. There are plenty of programs. There is no
Hmm.
reason for you not to do this. So, um, let's get right into it. One of the first icebreakers, I ask everybody this when they come on, just so we can kind of build some rapport and open up the conversation. The first icebreaker is, what was your favorite, if you can remember, what was your favorite childhood book?
I had a few. Um, there's like the one that I always had for some reason, that I read like way beyond childhood over and over, which was the monster at the end of this book, the golden book with Grover in it, and he's like, "Don't turn the page," and I just recently got a T-shirt that says "You turn the page" with Grover on it, and that was like I don't know what it was I loved about that book, but it definitely is one that I always go back to. And then the other one is Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters by John Steptoe. I never had my own personal copy of that, but I remember going to that in the classroom always whenever it was read aloud with the teacher, or we had like quiet reading time. I'm not even sure I remember what the story was about, but like just turning the pages and looking at the paintings, and it was such a gorgeous book. I gotta see if I can find a copy to
Yeah.
have for myself.
I've heard of both of those. I've never read them. And one of my goals as I continue to navigate having these conversations as books are dropped, as I talk to people at the end of each season, I don't know how, don't hold me to this, you guys, but at the end of my goal is to create like maybe a bibliophile of the season of all of the books that were mentioned so that people
Hmm.
who may be interested they can go and purchase or check them out at their local library. And so as a librarian, I when librarians come on, I don't just ask them do they have a library card. I ask them how many library cards do they have. So how many because librarians, I expect us to have library cards, and it's not always the case, but I expect us to. But how many library cards do you have? I so far am at the top, and I realized that I've just seen too much as far as library cards are concerned. So I'm curious about how many you have.
I at the moment only have one. I can use uh like 11 library systems with them, but since I have gone beyond the amount of time where I could use the ones that I left in other places without having to go in person to renew them. I've just got the one for my local system, but I love consortia that allow you to like use other people's collections too.
Yeah, I do too. My back in my hometown, I'm from East St. Louis, Illinois, and back in my hometown, my library card as well allowed me to go to other library systems throughout. If they were a part of like the Illinois Heartland system, I could just take my card and go use the different types of libraries there. And I thought that that was so awesome because I was like, can we could always do this? I didn't know this that I could always do this, and I could just bring my card and go there. So I definitely think it's beneficial. Like I said, I'm probably team too much. I'm at the top. A lot of quite a few of mine are expired, and I only actively use like maybe three of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've had over a course of time a total of maybe up to 15. So I was like, I recognize that I might be team too much, but that's okay. That's okay. I love being
Better team too much than not at all.
exactly, exactly. So are you a digital or a pen and paper person?
Both. Um, I and I've sort of combined them. I some at some point um, during the pandemic, I got an iPad because my husband had one. And I was watching him play with it, and I was like, I want one of those. And I happened to be able like have a little bit of extra cash hanging out. And now I try to use the digital notebook because I still really like writing things down, but I'm trying to use less paper. Although I still love notebooks, so I've just got notebooks all over the place, and I try to figure out how to use them as much as possible.
Yeah, same, same. I have a lot of journals, and I never used to be a real pen and paper person. I just started like becoming one within the last maybe 4 years, where I physically write more things down. But I've always been team digital, like big team digital. But I feel like there is something cathartic about writing something physically and
Mm-hmm.
being able to release in that way. So I do a little bit of both, but I lean more digital. And it's been interesting because the last few conversations I have been getting a lot of people who said that they do both, which is nice, and that's good to know that I'm not only the only person that prefers to have options. And so, who is other than yourself? Who's your favorite author or writer?
Gosh, I I always get this question, and I'm always like drawn aback by my brain not really being able to answer the question because it comes and goes day by day. Like today I'm going to say it's Beverly Jenkins because she's at the top of my mind. I've probably read more of her books than anyone else's, and she's just someone that I always look towards as like an aspiration for being both a writer and a human being. So, Beverly Jenkins, let's go with it.
Okay, I agree. I've not personally been able to meet her yet. I've been in a couple forums with her, and she's fun. She's a riot. She's a definitely
Mm-hmm.
entertaining to listen to, and I've not been able. Don't tell on me. I haven't read any of her books as of yet, but I am leaning towards that. Like just being in the space with her and understanding that she is more into romantic novels and romance in romance. I was like, this is interesting because I feel like when I was younger, I would have thought that I would have ran across her because I did read a lot more of romance, like romance novels, what we consider or what was considered by mainstream as urban fiction. I read a lot
Mm-hmm.
of those that dealt with relationships and with connections and black relationships and black love, which actually gets us into deep diving into what we're here for, which is talking about this beautiful compilation that you have so carefully constructed of these amazing writers. And I just like I said, I haven't had the opportunity to really deep dive into a lot of her literature, but it's on my TBR because we always have a TBR, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
and it's a miles long, like it's miles long. So she's on my to be read, but I definitely think highly of her, and I really appreciate the work that she's been doing for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like our conversation is going to be a little twofold. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about you as a librarian, then I'm going to, of course, really deep dive into talking to you because I did take the time. I had to put a rush on my book. I was like, listen, I'm going to talk to Jessica. I got to get this book and I got to hurry up and get it. So I got it and I read it over the course of, well, I didn't read the whole book. I read your part, I read your essay, and then I read the introduction, the parts that you contributed to, and then I'm going to go through, which is what I kind of like about compilations is the fact that you can skip through and
Mm-hmm.
use like maybe today I'll decide to read one of the essays and see what's going on. And so I was like, I have to get this book because I want to talk to Jessica, and I already wanted the book anyway, so it gives me an excuse to spend money on books. And so I was just like, okay, I'm super excited about this. But you talk about, even on your website, on your Instagram, even now in that conversation, you talk about your love for romance literature, your love for romance novels, which, like you said in your introduction, is not something that you always hear about in mainstream or when it comes to people who love reading. They don't often talk about their love for romance, if they even have a love for romance literature. And so when I was when I was reading through the introduction, you made some very valid points. But I also just wanted to pick your brain because I've been considering trying to do something of this magnitude, but I just didn't have. I won't say I don't have direction, but I was just like, how do you bring such brilliant minds together in one place? What was your thought process when you went in and you had this idea of Black Love Matters? Like, how did that go? How did you go about asking these people, can you be a part of this amazing thing that I have going on? So, talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. I started out with the idea, and once I decided that I really wanted it to be a collection of all kinds of voices, because the book that sparked the idea for me was a different collection, Well Read Black Girl, and for a while I was like, do I just write about my own perspective on this? Like, how should I go about this? And when I finally decided that no, a lot of voices are really what this kind of book needs, I I wasn't sure how to go about it. Because of my own connections just from being on romance Twitter for a million years and working with a few authors through the Festival of Books that I work with and through the library and through just knowing people. I have access to some people in really weird ways. Like there were some people I just like went on Twitter DM and was like, and some people I had to go like a little more formally like to their agents and be like, I had my whole pitch written out. Like, I'm working on this project. It's about this, and I would love to have this author's perspective on this, this, and this. And sometimes I actually wrote directly to people if they had either like a comments box on their website, or if I somehow managed to get their direct email. Like, there was the first person that I emailed is actually not a contributor to the book because she was like, this is a great idea, I don't have time. But I went really high to start out with, because once I did that, it was like, okay, I got that one out of the way. I can start communicating with people who feel like real humans now. um, and and I just sort of managed to get responses from this great group of people, many of whom I definitely messaged on Twitter.
Okay, yeah. I feel the same way about this podcast. Like, and I have not, I won't say I started low because nobody is low in my totem pole, but
Mm-hmm.
I definitely was a bit of a stretch for me, for my introverted side of me to be like, can you please be a guest on my podcast? Like, and so it's like, even just reaching out, I was like, okay, I have to have some boldness. I have to, beef myself up about this and be like, listen, I enjoy your work. I enjoy what you're doing. I see you're out here. Like, can you please come in and come on my show? So I understand having those nerves and trying to be like, oh my goodness, I want to reach out to this person. Hopefully they'll respond. Hopefully they don't think I'm spam. I've had this.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is not a spam. Like, I am a real person. I literally want you to come on to the show. And it has been proven favorable. So I'm glad that that has been working out for you. Well, I'm glad it did work out for you because otherwise you wouldn't have got this amazing compilation of like essays. And so
Mm-hmm.
that definitely I feel like plays a part in, just getting out of your comfort zone and reaching out to people and being like, look, I have this idea. I have this going on. I know that I can't do this by myself. Help us to stop. Like,
Mm-hmm.
help me out. And I'm
Basically.
glad that worked out for you. There are so many things that you said in this intro. Like, you did mention that well-read Black girl was a part of your inspiration, but there's so many other things that you have in here that I was like, I said, I'm not always a person that like annotates a book, but I have to like underline this because this is great. One of the things you said was Black people, especially in the United States, a happily ever after hasn't always been easy to come by and continues to present challenges. And I was like, sis, listen, why are you in my business? Because this is true. This is true for me in real life. And then another thing that you said is that Black community, well, it starts off as saying race pictures and novels written by Black creators developed their own popularity within the Black community, but weren't considered works of the canon until long after the deaths of the people involved in their production. And then it says Black consumers were expected to fall for the white narratives of love and romance that were offered to them. And that spoke to my dear old soul. And here's why. Growing up as a person who was almost sometimes force fed Shakespeare and
Mm-hmm.
force fed all of these different what we consider canonical, what they would consider the canonical literature, and then not having somebody who was in maybe an English major or whatever trying to explain my frustration to them. It was like, first off, what is canonical literature? What is a canon? What are you talking about? And so a part of my way of rebelling against the canon throughout undergrad, throughout grad school, was literally creating and centering myself around Black literature and about around people who wrote specifically about Black characters and things of that nature, and writing my papers specifically focusing on those types of authors and things, and just that was my way of resistance to say these people deserve to also have their airtime. Like, I shouldn't have to, my whole English degree shouldn't be based off of all well-off white males, and it's not to say
Mm-hmm.
that they don't deserve to be here, but it's to say that this is not all that's out there. So when you
Mm-hmm.
said that, I really appreciate. I said, finally, somebody put what I've been thinking on paper, because I agree. Like, come on, like, well, and why are we doing this? Like, why are we not, creating more narratives? And in your essay, you talk about it a lot more, and then you even said something along the lines of romantic love has been one of the most essential elements of storytelling for centuries. Please elaborate on that. Talk about that. Talk about your love for romance, and why you make such a bold statement to say that, because I agree with it, but please elaborate on that point.
Sure. I mean, if you think about storytelling of from all across the world, there is often some element of romantic piece to it. I mean, if you look at the fairy tales that we've Disneyfied, even the ones that don't end like they do with Disney, there is not just a marriage, but a relationship that builds. If you look at myth from all over the ancient world, there's tales of people doing all kinds of things in order to get back to their lover, to save their lover, all of that stuff. Like, there, we can't say that everyone for the past million years or however long humanity has been around, I can't remember, um, has has told stories with love at the center, because maybe in certain situations that's not always been the case. But if we look at like the biggest stories, and even in that canonical grouping of stories, there's so many, even the ones that don't have a happily ever after, that center some kind of romantic experience. Look at Shakespeare's comedies, look at Shakespeare's tragedies, look at Victorian writing, and ancient griot tales, and like anything that you can think of. Even if it's not all of the stories, there are a lot of them that center that sort of romantic thing that ends in a wedding but isn't just about the contractual wedding arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just something that maybe isn't everything, but that I, as someone who loves love stories, has noticed
Mm-hmm.
a thread throughout.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned something that I personally did not know. And I was like, wait, and I didn't bother to go back and read up on it, but you mentioned about Pew Research Center. I trust them, they're a
Mm-hmm.
trusted source. So whatever you got from them, I believe that it is true. And you said
Mm-hmm.
the person most likely to read a book in the United States is a college educated Black woman. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, yes, sis, absolutely. As speaking as a English major in
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, I had the equivalent of anywhere between 10 and 20 books that I had to try to read in a semester. Now, did I read all of those books? Absolutely. But I had to read them. I actually got burned out from reading because of me. I said, what? Why did I think to do this? I got burnt out for reading, but now I'm back into reading for pleasure, and I consume literature like crazy. So I agree with that. And so I think that, like you said, it's important that, like you said, we deserve joy in our lives, and it's important that we see ourselves in
Mm-hmm.
literature. And not only do we see ourselves in literature, but we see couples and people that look like us in literature.
Mm-hmm.
And so why did you think that that was important to let people know, like, listen, the majority of people that's out here reading is black college educated Black women, you need to make more stuff that caters to this audience, because they're the ones
Mm-hmm.
that's spending their dollars. And
Mm-hmm.
why do you think it's important for us to have more love stories that center on Black love, Black stories, Black relationships in all capacities? Why do you think that that's so important?
Well, I always go back to um at some point in one conversation that I saw probably online, Beverly Jenkins mentioning that in her earliest days talking with Vivian Stevens,
Mhm.
in their work together and in talking to the majority white publishing industry, the argument was that black people didn't read. So why did we need to publish all of these books by black people? And Toni Morrison probably said something similar, like over the course of the 20 years between Toni Morrison and Beverly Jenkins publishing their first book, no one really changed their minds about the fact that black people don't read. But the person most likely to pick up a book is a black woman.
Yeah,
So if we take into account the fact that romance is majority written and read by women, the most probable person to be reading a romance novel is a black woman.
absolutely.
So why is it so hard to present a story by black women or black authors of any gender featuring black characters that we can make a connection with? And, people say, oh, it's getting better. We're seeing more and more. But if you look at even just traditional publishing, which is, you know, maybe 50% of romance that's being published because so many authors are self publishing, it's less than 10%. So if we look at less than 10%, not even, it doesn't even make it to the demographic of what America looks like.
Mhm.
Like publishing industry doesn't look like America. So can we at least get there so
Ooh.
that so that we see what our world looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And that even kind of like encompasses the library world, as
Mhm.
a profession. It's like, or you are aware that the people that are more likely to use and utilize the library are people who are people of color, who are from underrepresented populations and communities. Why are we not doing more to expand our reach and to recruit people from those communities, people from
Mhm.
those demographics? And it's like we have these little things in place, these little procedures, these little movements to say, look, we have made progress in this area, but it's like 1%. Maybe we took one step when we should have probably took 10 steps. And I agree with you. I feel like that is part of the reason I'm because me personally, I am a self-published author and I help authors self-publish. I think that is part of the reason why more and more people are leaning into, especially people of color, are leaning more into self publishing because they are not the ones who get the book deals from these
Mhm.
big publishers. And it is kind of it's hard to always have to get rejected or to feel like you're being rejected all the time. And not only, it's also hard to feel like you don't belong there. And so when there is not a space created for you or nobody's really advocating for you to be in that space, then you do lean more towards, oh well, I can try to do this myself. But then like you're saying, even with the self-publishing, you're not really getting the advertising, you're not getting the marketing dollars, you're not getting the system because you have to do the legwork yourself. You're not getting the system to push behind you. And oftentimes your book can be on Amazon and it could disappear quickly if you're not getting people, like, they're purchasing the book but they're not writing reviews. And trying to
Mhm.
learn how to do those things, it's a little tough out here in these self-published streets. But um I agree with you in the sense that there needs to be some type of reorg, some type of overhaul of understanding, like, look at the numbers, you see this, literally cater to your markets, that these people are thirsty, they're wanting, they're desiring to have something that looks like them, that centers on them, that and we are very much so a testament that if you write it, if you film it, whatever, we will show up. the people will
Mm-hmm.
come. And so, what do you think are some steps? Just a brief, you don't have to say a whole lot. You don't have to even go into a rant if you don't, or if you choose to, feel free. You have the floor. But what do you think there are some steps that the publishing company, that the publishing community can take, additional steps that they can take to kind of like get more outside of course, catering to the market? What other things do you think that they can implement and put in place for them to cater to these audiences and to create more literature that are that is written by Black people, about Black people, for Black people? How do you think
Mm-hmm.
they can go about doing that? What steps do you feel like, or you're passionate about them taking, that can help with that?
Well, like one of the things, obviously, I have not done a case study of any of the big five publishing houses to see where the employees of color are, but in a lot of cases, they are not in the top tier editing positions. They're not in the places to actually make the decisions about who to bring on as new authors, and they're not the people who are saying, "Oh, we already have that writer, that black author, that black queer author. We don't need another one."
Mm-hmm.
That checkbox is taken. So just working to bring people in, but also make sure that people can move up, because just like in libraries, you might have a lot of black people, people of color of various types working in the lower tier professional areas, but then the higher you go, the wider it gets. And
Mm-hmm.
all of publishing could do with opening up that glass ceiling of whatever color, because I know that glass ceiling is like about women, but also everybody else. So that's a huge thing. And, like younger people, people who have more of an understanding and all of that, of what's popular and what the trends are and stuff, doesn't mean that they have to all be white, because just because majority culture is white. So that's the biggest thing, because that's really what's keeping a lot of people from even wanting to be in the traditional publishing scene, because they know that they're not going to get anywhere, and that the people who might want to buy their book and produce it and sell it are going to want to change it because it doesn't appeal to their majority audience.
Yeah, it goes back to that conversation of, I think one of my favorite digital content creators, Kev on Stage, talks about middle America and how they
Mm.
always talk about middle America. Meanwhile, middle America literally just meaning white people. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm also from middle America. Like, what do you mean exactly when you're saying middle America? I'm from middle America. My family's from middle America. We're all from the Midwest. I know a lot of Black people. I know a lot of indigenous people. I know a lot of Latin people who are from middle America. So what do you mean when you say middle America? Because we are there too. And so for you, it's
Mm-hmm.
your excuse for really trying to stay in this box and stay in this comfort area. And it's this idea of not having the ability to predict how something can go. And I think for a lot of not only the publishing company and the film industry is that they know Black people, if we like something, we like it. If we don't
Mm-hmm.
like something, we gonna tell you why we don't like it. And I think that that's more so what they're afraid of. They're afraid of, because at the end of the day, everybody's afraid of some form of rejection. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that is what it is. And so they rather not take the risk of taking the chance, and then it gets rejected. But once again, it has been proven time and time again, if you create it and you create it well, for instance, Issa Rae, if you
Mm-hmm.
create it and create it well, we'll show up and we'll like it, and either we'll really, really hate it or we'll really enjoy it. but at the end of the day, we're talking about it.
That's
And getting
absolutely.
and I think that I agree with you. I haven't done a case study either, but like I said, as coming from a person who's also a self-published author, that is exactly what it is. Even though I at some point maybe might pitch a book project to a big five publisher, I've always been on aired on the side of, if I can just create it and get it directly to the consumers that I know want to consume my content, and not have to go through all of the red tape and the bureaucracy, then I'm going to do it. And I just have this whole thing about, having my own intellectual property belong to me and not have to go through all of that other stuff too. But but if there ever was a bigger publisher to come knocking on my door, then by all means, I am in there with you. I'm there. Because even with your book, you did definitely go with Penguin Random House, which is a big
Hmm.
deal. That's a
Yeah.
big deal. How did you like I said, this is just really having this conversation. How did you pitch this? Because this is this is what we're talking about. This is a hard sell. How did that go? And I believe you have a literary agent, so I'm sure that helped as well. But how did that go to have this conversation to say this needs to be in the world? People
Mm.
need to see this, and for it to be having the success that it's having. How did that go for you? And I'm sure you were overjoyed when you got
Oh gosh, yes.
it.
So I this is another one of those situations where I lucked into having connections because you mentioned I have a literary agent. Tara and I started out as mutuals on Twitter. She used to be an editor for a romance imprint that no longer exists and went out into and moved into literary agenting. And I actually reached out to her first and was like, I have this idea. Do you think it would sell? And she said, and I was just, inquiring someone who knows the industry. And she was on board right away and said, absolutely, I think this is something that is really needed. And here's how you write a nonfiction proposal and get back to me when you're done. And all of a sudden, I had an agent.
That's amazing. Like this, like I said, this is a learning environment and experiments for me. Cause look, I need to know this information. And this is how you build connections that clearly Twitter is useful for other things other than negativity. I am
Mm-hmm.
low key a little afraid of Twitter. I have tried to be on Twitter more than once, and I have deleted my accounts each time because it's just so much going on over there. And I
Mm-hmm.
might attempt, I'm not making any promises, but I might attempt to try it a third time. Maybe third times will be the charm. But as I'm seeing is that Twitter has been very helpful and very useful for you in making connections and getting this book published and getting this book written. And so I might go back over there. I might try. I mean,
Yeah, join us. If you curate your experience well, then you still get some of the weirdness and you still get some of the negativity, but you can also mute and block people to your heart's content.
and I am team block you. I am an advocate for blocking people. I think that it is self care. I think that is very much so necessary. So let's dive into your essay because first off, your essay was amazing. You did a
Oh, thank you.
good job writing it. And your essay title was Interracial Romance in the Single Story. And so when I was reading it, I was like, okay, where are we going, Jessica? Where are we going? And because I also went to a PWI or a private white institution as well. But you said so many things here. And I felt like this was a very powerful and complex story, and it's just my opinion, and you may think differently. It's a very complex story to write, right? Because you mentioned at the very beginning that you're in an interracial relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but you also still feel like there is a need for to see more black relationships, meaning black love with black men and black women, and that it's often what they give us and what we're fed into the media and into books is more of a black woman with the white male, that narrative. And because you said that it is considered more palatable, which I definitely agree with that sentiment. as you said it. But I thought it was quite interesting because growing up for me, I often seen more black men with white women, but then you
Mm,
came from the other side of the story to say that there's more often on TV and in books, there's more black women centered with white males. And I was, as I was reading your essay, I was pondering, and I had to like, I'm like, you know how you go through your file in your head, and I'm like,
mm-hmm.
she's right, and it never dawned on me that that was actually what was happening. And I remember that year in the Super Bowl, as you mentioned, where it was a lot of commercials that centered on predominantly interracial couples and ambiguous looking children. And it's not to say that those things are bad, but it's to say that we need to see ourselves. We need to see
Mm-hmm.
our people as well. And so talk about that. Let's talk about this essay and why you felt so passionately about the conversation of having more couple centered in specifically black love, which is black men and black women, and why that's a necessity and why we need more of that.
There have been a lot of conversations recently and over the past several years about this sort of split almost between black romance and interracial romance. And even when I like came back to romance and got my first e-reader and started looking through the Kindle store looking for new books to read, and gosh, the 2012 Kindle store was like the wild, wild west of finding new books, I'll tell you. It was almost always, when I went looking, black women and white men. And like you mentioned, it's not like I have a problem with that kind of relationship because I am in one myself. But when you look at the past decade and where we are now, like even my publisher, Berkeley, they have several black women who are writing for them now, but the majority of them either started out with interracial relationships or write almost completely interracial relationships. And we see a lot of authors in both the traditional and in the independent arena that write more interracial than black romance. And to the point where there was an argument a couple weeks ago about the fact that someone called anything in which a black woman is getting loved on black romance when that's not black romance. um
Yeah.
so like when I was trying to figure out like what story I wanted to tell in this collection, since I had so many other people who could tell other stories so much better than I could, I thought about what I had seen, what this whole concept of the single story, if if this story is the only one that's being told about a group of people, that's what people are going to expect of that group of people. So it was really something that sat with me, because even though I personally love that experience and will pick up any book featuring a well produced interracial romance, it's almost taking over
Mm-hmm.
and taking away and erasing the the picture of multiple black people in love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think that's also part of the reason which, a couple years ago, I actually just discovered that there was a Black Love Day. And the crazy thing about it is that Black Love Day has been around for a very long time, since like the 90s. But it's the day before actual Valentine's Day. So February 13th is Black Love Day. And then of course Valentine's Day is February 14th. And when I did that brief research about why it was created and why it was necessary, it speaks on some of the things that you just said, which is that we need to see these narratives. And to be honest, the last thing that I remember even seeing on television that centered around black men and black women loving each other was probably the Cosby Show. And I know Bill
Mm.
Cosby is very controversial, but if I had a point of reference, that would be my first go-to. And then the next thing would be, of course, the Fresh Prince. And then after that, it would be like maybe a different world. But these are all shows that are like 20 and 30 years old. And it's just like, the closest that thing that I can get to now in this day and age that actually shows black love and black men and black women being seen is was Insecure, and that was Issa Rae's, but everybody is not have accessible to that. As far as
Mm-hmm.
mainstream is concerned, we really don't have, because like, I mean, we have Blackish, but Blackish centers on a black man and a black woman who is also biracial. And so then it's like, would that be considered black love? And so it's just so complicated how nuanced I think some of these things get, but I do understand the point and the purpose, because to be honest, is my goal. Although I've always wanted to do some interracial dating and never had the opportunity, it may come at some point. It is my goal. Ultimately, I've always desired to be in a romantic relationship and lifelong partnership with a black man. And that's always been a desire of mine. But I do understand how constantly being exposed to these other stories and seeing these other narratives and stuff, you do, I mean, it's not, like I said, once again, interracial marriage and things like that are not a negative thing, because I'm a product of also that as well, of those things. I mean, we all are. If you have light skin in the black community, we know how that came into the bloodline. We're fully aware of how that showed up. Like, we don't need any reminders. We understand
Mm-hmm.
how we became the color we became. But I definitely agree with you on, we need to see more of us. And one of the things that, like I said, it was just so many things that I was like, look, girl, you come on, Jess. Because when you said, because black women can't have nice things, I was like, whoo, I'm triggered. I am triggered. Like, do we need to have this conversation? And then you said it feels incredibly visceral when it happens so regularly to a demographic who is so irregularly seen across networks. And I was just like, Jessica is a woman after my own heart. Because, yes. And so, my question is, being that you are in a interracial marriage, and how hard was it for you to like write this, to have this essay out here in the world and be like, this is completely, almost in many ways, completely opposite of what I actually am living. But I think I have to put this out here. I have to say that. So, what was the hard parts about writing this essay for you? Did you feel like it was kind of like ripping apart or tearing down the very things that Did you feel, did your love feel challenged while you were writing this, or were you good?
I'm pretty firm in like my own personal relationship, but there were sometimes when I was writing that particular essay where I had to just be like, pull it back, because even though like I know that my personal relationship is founded on something good, and that we've been working together for a decade and a half to work through some of the stuff that is happening on the pages of that essay, like thinking about some of the things as they're presented in fiction, and whether it's on television or in books, or if we're talking about history or we're talking about stage plays or whatever. um I it's like I had to just make sure that I was still connected to what I was talking about, like not separating myself from it, but thinking about my family, my friend, like all of that, to really think about how I might be in this particular kind of relationship, but it's not the only one I want to see, because that's not my parents, that's not my grandparents, that's not my aunts and uncles, that's like I I am over here. We should have this bubble in this little corner, but instead we have this bubble and this little corner instead. So I I wanted I didn't, second guess my own personal experiences or anything while I was writing it, but I was kind of thinking about like where I sat in all of it as I was, looking at all of these examples that I brought up.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And ooh, girl, like I can only imagine. Like I really can only imagine like trying to advocate for this, but then while also still trying to remain steadfast and knowing like this is what I chose, this is my love, this is what I desire, this is why I chose this. But and I agree and I believe that life doesn't have to be this or that. It can be this and that. And so I think that you did a
Mm-hmm.
really good job of mirroring the this and the that to say that although this is my reality, this is the life that I live. Listen, for this. Like, let's stop acting like this isn't necessary because this is
Mm-hmm.
my lived experience. This is where I come from. This is where I was birthed from. This is what was created. This is the love that created me and who I am
Mm-hmm.
and why it's still so much, so very much so important. So what was some of the I know that those were some of the tough parts, but what were some like the really fun parts about writing this essay that you care to share?
Well, some of the fun parts was really like revisiting a lot of the things that I use as examples, for the good and the not so great. Doing some research to find like some of those quotes, and watching things that I thought maybe I remembered correctly, but really needed to revisit. Even just to like remind myself why I like them. Like I hadn't seen Romeo Must Die in like 20 years at that point, and I had sat down to watch it. I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work in this anymore, but it's still fun.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, I was like, wait, Romeo was that was an interracial relationship. I listen, it had been years for me too. Now I want to go back and watch it and be like, I haven't seen this in forever. And so I think it's available on one of the streaming sites now. So I'm definitely going to take some time to go back and watch it because it was great. So we're coming close to the end here. There's so many things I highlighted in this essay that I would love to talk to you about. And all I'm gonna say is y'all go pick up the book because it's worth it. Like it is definitely worth it. But I do want to say this one thing that you said that Black people in the midst of a great romantic relationship is still valid and vital. And there are Black creators, whether they are working under the canopy of a bigger white awning or their own, who know how to make it work. And I thought that that was just perfect. I was like, chef's kiss. Absolutely. And it goes back to your point of what you said earlier, which is that if you put us in the space, then you have the people in the room that can teach you, train you, and talk to you about why this is important
Mm-hmm.
and why it's necessary. So some of my, I guess, last two questions. One of them is, um, why do you? First off, what advice? Let's go with this one first. What advice would you give someone who is a writer or maybe starting off writing and they want to break into romance? What advice would you give to that person? As what piece of advice, I should say, would you feel is vital to them when they go into learning or starting their journey as a writer and wanting they've read your essay and they say, Jessica, I'm gun ho, I'm ready to jump in. What would you say to them? Where would you tell them to start in that regard?
Gosh. Oh, the baseline is definitely reading, just reading. I've picked up so many things, on my little side corner of writing fiction
Mhm.
just from reading other romance novels, because there's some people who will say that you have to follow the beats, and maybe if you're writing for like Harlequin, you have to follow certain rhythms of a story, and get within a certain page number and all of that. But if you look at the indies, if you look at Christina C. Jones and Katrina Jackson and all of those people, you see that you can do almost anything with a romance novel as long as there's a central love story and a happily ever after. Because what you're offering is the guarantee that no matter what happens in the book, if these two people, or three or four, or however many you're putting together, belong together, then they're going to be together at the end.
That's so good. That's so good. That is that okay, yeah. That's help. Look, that just helped me. Like that just helped. So if I'm a person, I'm standing in the bookstore or I'm on Amazon and I'm looking at your book or I'm on Bookstagram and I keep seeing your book flash before me, why? Give me the elevator speech of why someone needs to pick up Black Love Matters.
This book has so many amazing perspectives in it. And as the person who edited it and recruited everyone who was writing it, I can tell you firsthand that there is not a similar essay in this book. And you will learn so much about individual people and Black people as a whole. And you will come out sort of hopeful for the universe and dreading your TBR.
I agree. Because there's so many artists in here, and I'm like, oh, Brittany, don't do it. Don't do it. I had to call myself by my government name. I was like, don't, do not, do not like jump into creating another miles long list of. But I do appreciate at the end that you have a bibliography in here. I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
all of that. I said, oh yes, thank you, but I was like, I'm gonna stay away from there because if I go up in there, then I'm gonna be buying stuff that I don't need to be buying, and I don't need to do that to myself. Listen, I am really trying very hard to stop like buying books and just having them and not actually reading them. And that's part of the reason why I've been checking out more things at the library. But the library was taking too long. I said, listen, y'all taking too long to get me this. I gotta go. And I definitely love supporting Black women in their books. So it's like I'm going to go order it because y'all taking too long to get it to me, and I need to read this. Like I don't have time for this. So Amazon was tried and true. They was helpful for because they're taking over the world when it comes to like getting things out there and shipping. They're definitely monopolizing all of our lives. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So to end this off, I just really want to say thank you for taking this time to have this conversation with me. I feel like it was so enlightening. It was definitely refreshing to hear your perspective and to just have a talk with you. Please let people know where they can follow you, where they can find you, where they can find your content. And are you working on anything new that we should be on the lookout for to get our dollars together to purchase? Just all of the things.
Sure. You can find everything about me on my website, jessicapryde.com, Pryde. And that will link you out to my Twitter account, Jess is reading, my Instagram, Jess underscore is underscore reading, even my TikTok, which is not very popular, but I try. I'm trying. Um, and I also write frequently for Book Riot, and am the co host of the Win in Romance podcast, where we talk about and recommend books. And I just started a new project on Medium. I checked with legal at Penguin Random House first, before I named my Black romance and media review vertical Black Love Matters. But I just started doing long form reviews of Black romance novels there. So I only have one, but I'm working on it to be a little better. So that's all I'm really working on right now. But I will keep people posted.
Awesome. Thank you for letting us know. And like I said, thank you for being here. It has been wonderful. I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll let you go soon after that. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you for another wonderful week with you all. And I'll catch you back here next week. Have a good weekend.